Hello and welcome. This video is an introduction to client and server computer networking in C#. So it's the first of a series that's designed to assist students in starting on the computer networking assignment, particularly for the module 08241 and 08246 in the second year of the computer science degrees at the University of Hull. So the video is not intended to be a replacement for those attending the class laboratories, but aims to assist students who might have missed some laboratories or might have got behind in the work or find other way that they need some further assistance. So it's an extra resource that you can look at. But don't forget that when you go to the scheduled class laboratories, that you actually be able to get help from humans, which is the staff who teach you, and trained class demonstrators who can specifically give you one-to-one help with the problems. So the video is not the main resource, it's an additional resource. Now this video is based on a notional example networking assignment that's different from the real class assignment. And as a result, the code that we're going to write in this video will not be usable for your actual class assignment. You cannot therefore take the code, copy it off the screen from the video and actually hand it in, because it's going to be no use to you as it actually solves a different problem. But the concepts shown in the video should still be of great deal of help, as they show methods and techniques for solving these kind of problems. So let's get going. Let's move this script away. So the first thing that you're going to have to do is find the documents that you need to get things going. So let's open a web browser and we're going to look at the virtual learning environment that we use for teaching computer science, which is SharePoint. And you should be able to go to the page for the module, for example, the networking course. And then you should be able to go to the one for the assessment, and then you should be able to get the ACW description. So that's what you need. So then it would be a good idea to download that and perhaps put that somewhere, like on your desktop or somewhere easily available. So there it is there. Now the other thing that you're going to need to do a programming assignment is some books to help you with programming. People don't do programming without programming manuals or programming guides. So one of the other things that you remember is you first learn programming in Programming 101, and then you could look at the reading list for Programming 101, and you'll see that there's books like C# for students or C# how to program, and there was also a supplementary reading list, C# for students, Visual C# how to program, Code Complete, and various other books. But one of the main books that everyone was given a copy of was called the Rob Miles Yellow Book. And there we are, the Rob Miles Yellow Book. Google knows about that. So if you don't have a copy, you can get a copy and you can save that to your desktop. And there we've got a copy of the Yellow Book. So the other resource that you're going to need is a tool for programming. Now in the labs we have Visual Studio. So we'll get Visual Studio going. So here's Visual Studio that you're going to use to start programming the assignment. Now those who have attended the class will also know that in the networking and games architecture they had an initial lecture on network programming. So you'll need some of the slides that you were taught how to do the network socket programming to get started. So these are the slides. And you were given a sample client. So we've got our basic things. So let's start looking at our basic instructions and what to do. Now we've got all the material ready. So let's first look at the sample assignment, and it tells you what you have to do. It requires you to implement 2 C# Windows console applications. One is the client and one is the server, and then there's lots of various bits of specifications, and we could scroll down. Now at the end it's got timescale for the completion of the work, and it shows you various steps: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we're going to highlight first step 1. So step 1 says copy and complete the sample client from the lecture slides to perform a WHOIS request. Okay, so that's what we need to do. We need to copy that lecture. Is we can go to Visual Studio and we want to create a new project. That's how we're going to get started. And now it said we want a C# console application. So here we select Visual C#, and here we select console application. And then we've got to select a place to put it. Now I've already preset the place, but you usually don't want to take the default. So at the University of Hull you probably want to go to your G drive, and then in a G drive you perhaps want a folder for this particular module, and that will be the folder that you put your solutions in. And then we want to give it a name. So we don't want to just take the default name, console application number 1, that Microsoft has put in. We want a sensible name. Now another name, I can call it class client. Now you can see Visual Studio is creating all the files it needs to make one of those, and then it's made one. So we can now go to here and we can pick up from the lecture slides. We highlight that and do Control C and copy that, and I can do Alt Tab, and I can switch back to Visual Studio, and I can replace all of that, and I'll do a Control V, with the thing from the slides. Okay, so here's the piece of code from the class. So one of the things I can then do is try and build that solution, and let's see, have I been given something that just works? It looks like I might have done. So we now need to get that working, and so what we want to do now is run a command prompt. But if we run a command prompt, it starts in an auto place, or we can just go directly to the class client binary, and here's the binaries, and we should be able to say open command window here. So let's do that. So right, now we've got a command prompt ready to run the sample program which we've just built. So we can do a dir in the command prompt, and we can see here there's a thing called class client. We can run that by typing the name of the program, class client, in the command prompt, and look to see what happens. So the first thing we've got is an index out of range exception at line 14. So we can go into the debugger if we wanted to and do debug and see what the problem is. And it says here it's at this line here, and an index out of range. There's the index args 0. Well, we've got that fault because we haven't given it any arguments. So we need to give it some arguments so that it can run. So we could stop running the program, press stop, and we could run the program again, and we could give it some kind of argument. So I could give it my username. You'll see now we don't get the execution error, but it's not doing anything. It's sitting there and waiting, and then it finishes not having said anything. So it doesn't look like it's doing very much. But there is a hint about that in the task list. So if we see here, we are doing step 1. It says, you may need to ask your demonstrator about Stream.Flush, which is not included in the code. So obviously there's a hint there that something extra is needed in the code, and we know it's Stream.Flush. So this is designed for you to be in the lab, and the demonstrators would explain what the issue is. Now that line of code was deliberately left out so that you can understand the purposes of Flush. So the thing is, where should we put it? I don't know. Let's try putting it at the top. Well, that doesn't do anything. Actually, it's a particular stream. It's one of these streams. So here we've got Flush, and now the IntelliSense is telling us what that does. Stream writer Flush clears all buffers for the current writer and causes any buffer data to be written. Okay, so it's causing something to be written, which implies if you don't flush, it hasn't been written. So probably we want to do that after we do a write. But you can see how Visual Studio and the IntelliSense is giving you the kind of information that you might want. And actually what happens here is when you do a write line, it doesn't send it across the internet. You need to tell the system when you've got enough lines together that you wish packaged up to transmit to the remote machine, or in this case the server. So you can do many write lines, and then when you've got the set of material you want to send, then you flush it to the other side, and then you can read the answer. If you put the flush, don't put the flush before you read, the remote server hasn't got your command yet, so it doesn't give you an answer, so you wait forever for an answer. So that's the explanation of what has happened here. So we can now save that, and I can select the build again, so I can build this solution, and now it's ready, and I can go to my command prompt window and I can run it. Now see, we've now got an answer from the server, and the server is networksolutions.com, and it doesn't know who CSBCT is. Well, obviously it doesn't know who I am, but we could ask it who it is itself. So we ask networksolutions.com, who is networksolutions.com? And it actually gives me an answer. It says networksolutions.com is a machine in Herndon, Virginia, and actually in Sunrise Valley Drive, Suite 300. It's got his phone number, his location, and the email address. So we've actually made a connection to a remote database in America. We've made a query of it with this little program, and that little program is working. Now there's some other things we could do to that program to make it a bit more robust. Notice if we didn't give it any arguments, it crashed. So what can we do about that? So we need to find out if this argument is got a 0. So we might want to look into one of our books how to do that. Let's put away the slides, and if we look into our C programming book, we can see what it says about arrays. Look for the search button, which is here on the left, and we can search for array. Okay, so we can keep searching. So here we've got something which takes you beyond the length. In this respect, strings are just like arrays. It's possible to use a method on them to find out how long they are. Okay, so that was in the book that we had last year. So we can use those techniques, the try, catch and the check length, to make sure that this program doesn't crash. It gives us a sensible error message. So now we can go if, and the array that we're having a problem with was args. So if args length is less than 1, well, actually we want if it's greater than or equal to 1, we want to do our work here, and then when we've done that work, we might want to print an error message. Now the other thing we might want to do is, if anything goes wrong, we could catch it. So we could do something like try, and around the whole program we could put a catch, like that. Let's see if that builds. Okay, I've got a semicolon missing just here. Notice it says the variable C is declared but never used. You might try and think why that is. Well, it's just a line that's not needed. So it looks like we've built that now. So we can try calling our program class client, and now it says something sensible like no arguments provided, which is very good. And we've trapped any errors with the try catch, so our program might be a bit more robust now. So that's more or less everything working on this client, and we've proved we can write a program to talk, a client program to talk to a server. Just before we wrap up looking at this sample client, there's a couple more features of Visual Studio we can quickly look at before we move on. You notice I'd always run it from the command prompt, and we have built a command prompt application, but you can run these things from Visual Studio, perhaps by pressing the start button. Well, let's show you what happens if we press the start button. You see output just flashes up and disappears very quickly. But there is a capability there if you do start without debugging, which is Control F5. It runs and says no arguments provided, but it does wait for you to read the message, and then you can press any key to continue. So I didn't need to change my program to stop the screen flashing up. And a novice mistake that people make is they put a read key or a read line in there, but you don't need to. That's already built into Visual Studio. So we need to give it some arguments, which we had done from the command prompt. So we can do that by looking at the properties of our project here, and if we go to debug, it says command line arguments. So I can put networksolutions.com in there, and I could go back to the program, and then under the debug menu I can say start without debugging, and now it runs, you see, and we have got the output and it's waited for me, and I'm running it entirely within Visual Studio. The only annoying thing about that is I have to go to this window whenever I want to change the output. But for these kind of programs, when they're actually run for when they're delivered, they will be running in this command prompt. So you need to test them in the command. The only other thing to mention about this program, I've said the Array.Length greater than 1, but we're only using the first one. So we could make a further change to the program if we wanted to, that says if it's equal to 1 we do that, and else if it's not equal to 1 we could change that to the wrong number of arguments, so 0, 2, 3 would all be the wrong number. But we can look at those kind of things in more detail when we go on to the other stages of coding. So I hope you found that tutorial useful.